Morning and Happy New Year. The time is now 9:34 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. State Board of Education meeting of January 9th, 2024 is called to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda in order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the agenda and add a resolution under Roman numeral 12.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Support.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion associated with adding the element to the agenda?
I will read it into the record. It's titled Access to Education for Foster Youth Resolution. Whereas the Michigan Senate is coming back to session to start on January 10th, 2024, whereas Michigan foster youth are struggling to access Michigan merit curriculum, whereas the State Board of Education has heard testimony twice in the last 18 months from foster youth regarding the ongoing problems of their educational access and support, and foster youth stakeholders have been advocating for our youth for much longer, whereas the Michigan House of Representatives has passed House Bill 4676 by a vote of 104 to 3 in an overwhelmingly bipartisan manner. Whereas foster youth, adult success, and lifelong learning is rooted in the foundation of equal access to the necessary components needed to graduate with a diploma, like all other students in the state of Michigan. Therefore, be it resolved, the Michigan State Board of Education is urging the Michigan Senate to immediately pass House Bill 4676 as adopted by the Michigan House of Representatives, give it immediate effect, and the governor to sign it into law.
We have a motion. We have second. It's been read into the record. Any other discussion? Hearing none. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McMillan.
I would move a resolution that I'm entitling Stop Allowing Librarians to Distribute Pornography to Kids and add it to the agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Second by Ms. Snyder. Mr. McMillan,
And I would like
for you to read it into the record.
It's a resolution calling to remove exemptions allowing Michigan public school librarians to distribute sexually explicit materials to minors without penalty. Whereas MCL 722.676B and D provide exemptions from prosecution for disseminating sexually explicit materials to minors, whereas many parents in Michigan are increasingly seeing books and materials in schools that clearly contain, in their opinion, age-inappropriate sexually explicit images and narratives, whereas neuroscience research proves that sexual stimuli harmfully wires and traumatizes underdeveloped young brains. Therefore, be it resolved that the Michigan State Board of Education calls on the state legislature to remove the exemptions provided to librarians from being prosecuted for disseminating sexually explicit materials to minors, while allowing reproductive health education materials that have been approved by the state law-required local advisory boards, where at least half of the composition of each must be parents whose children attend schools in the district. And I'd like to speak to it briefly.
to its presence on the agenda.
Yeah, I think that this resolution is important to go on the agenda and be debated. I don't think anybody here disagrees that there is a line. There's something that would be sexually explicit. I think that everybody here would agree that libraries shouldn't have Playboy. They shouldn't have other magazines of that nature. So there is certainly a line. Some people would say that books that contain these images that are in the Troy High School, and I don't know, you probably didn't see it. I don't know if you did pass those down. That have these images are fine. Well, and why wouldn't you want to? Because they're sexually explicit. I understand they're uncomfortable. They're not nice for kids, especially. So I just think that I don't know why this would be allowed to exempt librarians if they aren't distributing pornography or sexually explicit images. No problem. But if they are, there should be some repercussions. They should be held liable. It's just a matter of where that line is drawn, and we traditionally say that that's done with community standards. Some places may think those are fine, some places may disagree, but if that line is crossed, then librarians would know that that material should not be in their schools, and that should be debated at the local level. So I don't know why there would be any, unless there's some desire to get them right up to the line, to get these kids kind of sexualized as much as we can without crossing some gray line. I think that it's important to remove this exemption and hold librarians accountable when they distribute sexually explicit images. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we have a motion, we have a second, it's been read into the record. There's been a brief sharing of why it belongs on the agenda. Anyone else? Ms. Snyder.
I'll be succinct and speak to it, just its presence on the agenda and our ability to speak to it on the whole as a Board of Education. There is an epidemic of sexual abuse in schools, and Michigan is no stranger to that. I think that as we move forward in the coming months, it'll be something we need to consider significantly and something we've always needed to consider. So I think we should have the discussion here today about how books in libraries actually contribute to the environment of this epidemic of sexual abuse in schools.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else on including it on the agenda? Dr. Pugh.
I will be voting no, and I do want to point out that there are at least one or two conversations that we will be having related to school libraries. We had a presentation last month as well, and that has and continuously will show that we just keep having these props that show up at our board table to spread misleading information, disinformation. So I will vote no.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Anyone else?
I would just like to point out that the image is from the book Gender Queer, and that book is not just in Troy High School, but in many schools across the state. So those images, and there's plenty of other books that have similar images or even more disturbing. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who cares to share? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote. This is not on the merits of the resolution. This is on the inclusion of the resolution on the agenda for discussion and vote today. Ms. Evans.
Bullock?
Negative.
Lipton?
No.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
No.
Pugh?
No.
Robinson?
No.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
No.
Motion fails.
Board, are there any other amendments to add to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, if I could please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Thank you, Mr. Bullock, for your moving of that motion, and Dr. Pritchett, thank you for your second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton? Yes. McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly? Yes. Motion carries.
At this time, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the State Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table, we have Board President Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Ms. Nikki Snyder from Dexter, and Ms. Candace Jackson, the Michigan Teacher of the Year from Detroit Public Schools Community District. Seated behind them today is Board Co-Vice President Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield. Back to the table to my right are Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, and Board Secretary Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Virtually, we have joining us today Ms. Stephanie O'Day, the Governor's K-12 Policy Advisor ex officio.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. The public may register to provide comment during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. To provide public comment by telephone, please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage, again, at www.michigan.gov/MDE. /MDE. First item on today's agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting is a presentation on the power of a great librarian and access to a school library. During this presentation, we will hear from students and staff at Allen Park High School. They will share about the power of a great librarian and the importance of having access to a school library. We welcome our presenters, Mr. Randy Riley, State Librarian, Library of Michigan, Ms. Melissa Lambert, Media Specialist in the Allen Park High School Library, Mr. Jason Skiba, Principal of Allen Park High School, and then 4 students, Giselle, Christian, Amelia, and Crimson, all proud Allen Parkers. This is an information presentation, and no board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us today. I'm Melissa Lambert. I'm going to let our students do most of the talking, so they have all something prepared and will introduce themselves.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Giselle from Allen Park High School. I'm a junior.
I'm Crimson. I'm a junior at Allen Park High School.
Hi, I'm Christian. I am a senior at Allen Park High School and the book club president.
I'm Amelia, and I'm also a senior at Allen Park High School.
Go
ahead and get started.
I'll be starting off with the programs our library contains in Allen Park High School. One of our programs is called One Book, One School. At Allen Park High School, students and staff are encouraged to read the same book no matter what level of curriculum. The main purpose of this program is to unite the students with common connection and common goal. Our One Book, One School book this year is The Last Cuentecita by Donna Barra Higuera. We have the honor to be able to meet her in February. Freshman year, my school read Furia as for One Book, One School. I was impressed how interested and united my grade was, even though there were differences of curriculum. I was in honors ELA, while most of my friends were in ELA 9. So it was pretty neat seeing everybody carry around the same book. We were all immersed in the same book and the same characters. Another program that our library contains is Hour of Code. Freshmen and sophomores have the opportunity to discover coding and the use of it. Because students are unaware of such concepts, this helps students explore new subjects and expand creativity. It does not matter level of skill or curriculum to code. A great feature is the access to everyone. During sophomore year, we did Hour of Code, and I thought it was quite interesting. Prior to this experience, I did not know anything about coding or the use of it. I am grateful I had this experience and an opportunity to explore an unknown topic. Having a librarian, knowing students' interests and hobbies, allows for a more connected community within our library. Our librarian, Mrs. Lambert, is aware of the importance of connection and has developed different programs to connect students and staff. These programs have the following outcomes: allowing students to experience new topics, helps spark new interest in learning. New activities allow students to experience learning beyond the classroom walls. Hands-on activities creates more engaging students and greater creativity. A united school leads to a closer community, common goals, and encouragement. Thank you.
I'm Crimson again, and I'm going to be talking about the space provided in libraries and how the environment positively affects students and staff. So for starters, the space in the Media Center offers a welcoming environment that encourages book browsing by keeping books on display with their covers facing forward and organized by their genres, which ultimately draws attention to them. Furniture for students and staff to use, which is set up in a way for collaboration or individual work. Board games, puzzles, coloring activities, and other activities that helps build connections with peers and the school environment, along with positive learning environments for JAG study and tutoring, along with other extracurricular activities and clubs. And the positive results that come from the space and resources provided in the Media Center include relationship building, collaboration with peers, individual work being done, motivation to do schoolwork in school, access of a safe space for everyone, and more opportunities for screen and brain breaks. As a person who has transferred schools my whole life, the Media Center has really offered me a welcoming environment that made me feel less isolated in those new environments. So since then, I've been in the library almost every single day, unless I'm not at school. And during lunch, specifically, I see students working together, working on their own, just getting a break. And then during my free time, when I usually go, I see people meeting with faculty members in their offices in the library, classes being taught, people checking out books, etc. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Christian, and I will be focusing rather on the opportunities and resources we offer at Allen Park High School. I find that the resources allow students to have access to new opportunities they previously would not have, as some people would not be able to necessarily like invest financially in like programs, databases, things like that. At Allen Park High School, I use a few resources like the Sora app and online databases we use as well, and especially our diverse book collection. The Sora app is an app filled with audiobooks, ebooks that the students' school gives them access to, and that access really does help students who don't necessarily focus on any, like if they have struggle reading text, they can really do focus on reading in a different manner. It really broadens the scope of how people can get information at their school, and they can do this at home as well. And then another way that I really do like looking at is our databases we offer through mail.org and the Gale databases. Databases are just really important in my opinion, just because they simplify the path to find factual and true information. And not only do they have more unbiased opinions, sometimes they touch on more like opinions that have some sort of bias either way, and that allows students to have more of a well-rounded idea of what's happening around them. Last but not least, I do really like our diverse book collection. A diverse book collection allows students to view things in a different manner than they would usually, as books do have really different perspectives and career fields that other people just may not really have any familiarity towards. Personally, I found this really good memoir last year, and it really did get me into the reading nonfiction novels that are written. It had had a man in his mugshot, and I never really looked towards books like that, just since it's quite peculiar. And at my regular bookstore, I usually don't invest in quite some books, since I don't know if I can commit to the book. What if I don't like it? What if I can't go over there? So just having the library right there, I can just go in. And after reading the book, I really saw a new light of how people can really experience different in a different manner, and all their struggles are really just highlighted in that expanse of all the books we have at our school. And I think it's really important to focus on having a wide array of things just to read. Thank you.
So again, I'm Amelia, and I'm going to be talking about how our Allen Park Library provides students with instructions to become critical users of information. So at the beginning of this year, I was enrolled in a research class where we needed to find different types of sources, such as scholarly, secondary, primary. Truthfully, I had no idea what that meant or the differences between them, but with the help of group and one-on-one instruction from our media specialist, Ms. Lambert, I was not only able to learn the differences between these types of sources, but the databases to use to find them, such as JSTOR and Gale, which, through our library system, we are provided with free access to. Once we found these sources, Ms. Lambert taught us how to cite them in MLA format in order to make sure that we were sourcing these articles ethically, that we were continuously quoting throughout our papers. And that is very important for academic integrity, especially as we move on to college. So another opportunity that we were provided with through our library system was this speed dating book activity Ms. Lambert had us do. Basically, we all came down to the library, and set up at different tables was different genres of books, and she had printed out a template for us, and we got about a minute to read the back summary on the back cover and just kind of jot down our ideas on these books. And by the end, we were able to pick a book of interest for enjoyable reading, which is so important. And we were really being able to make use of this wide selection we're so lucky to have at Allen Park. And additionally, Ms. Lambert taught us how to find credible sources through a misinformation and disinformation activity. So we were given links to different websites and asked to try to decipher whether or not it was a trustworthy article. And me and my fellow classmates thought that we could just trust these articles we were given in school. We didn't realize how you kind of have to investigate it more. And she taught us to look into the author and the website that this article was from to make sure that they didn't have a bias on the opinion that we were reading. And this really encourages students to take a more active role in their education rather than just blindly following and believing whatever Google pulls up when we search something. I'm so grateful for our media specialist, Ms. Lambert, and feel so fortunate to have access to this type of library system. And I believe it is of the utmost importance for other schools in Michigan to be given the same resources and opportunities that we are provided with at Allen Park for all of us here in Michigan to become critical users of information.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that concludes our presentation, and if anybody has questions for us or the students, please let us know.
Thank you very much, presenters. Board members, while you're reflecting upon the presentation, note that the Allen Park High School Library, under the direction of Ms. Lambert, received the 2023 21st Century Model School Library Award. That's important to understand and protect it. Every school does not have a librarian. Every school does not have a library that is open all hours of the day, lamentably. And we appreciate hearing from Allen Park, which is blessed with both. Board members, questions, comments, reflections? Ms. Lipton.
First of all, I really wanted to thank all of you for coming. I really learned a lot from your presentation, and I just had a few questions just to give some context to what you brought. Particular question about the One Book, One School program. How is the book chosen, just out of curiosity? And I assume 9th through 12th graders all read the same book within the same window. Could you just give me a little bit more I think that's really interesting idea, and I'm just curious, like, if you could expand on that program.
I can answer that, if that's okay. So it's a team of us that scour through books. We're starting to try to select next year's too. I take input from mostly English department members and also myself, and we usually have at least 3 or 4 staff members read the book. There's a couple of things that we try to keep in mind. We usually send out a Google form to the students asking what genre they prefer and what format of book they prefer. So graphic novel, novel and verse, novel, to get an idea of what they would enjoy reading the most. And then we also try to find something that is going to suit a wide reading level span and also a wide interest level. So it's kind of just voted on by the members of the committee that are selecting the book after we've had at least 3 or 4 people read it.
But it sounds like with input from students.
Yes.
In terms of sort of what they would like.
Yes.
And then is this something that's done like the summer before the school year starts, or in other words, how is it couched? So you select the book and then what happens?
So we're attempting to select the book before spring break, and then we get some curriculum in place because all of the English teachers teach the book in their class. So students we order the book. Come September, English teachers will decide when they're teaching it in their curriculum, and then each student receives the book in their English class. It's taught in their English class, but then I also encourage social studies teachers and science teachers and teachers of other subject areas to build off of a lesson, some aspect of the book, a theme of the book or a subject of the book, that they could at least teach one thing in their class related to the book. So it's truly, across the board, we're talking about in every class. So for the book that we're reading this year, The Last Quintista, We have our art students that are creating artwork based off of the book. Our science students, we had a mobile planetarium come, and so because there's talk of meteors and Halley's Comet in the book, so they were able to visit our mobile planetarium. Our social studies teachers are going to have a speaker come in and talk about personal history and sharing family history from generation to the next and how important storytelling is, because the last Quintista means the last storyteller. And so the book is about storytelling and sharing family stories. So she'll talk about her mother's escape from Germany during World War II. She was a Jewish woman, and how she continues her mother's story and how important it is that her mother's story is continued.
Do you feel that, a lot of the things that we talk about in education is creating school community, just sort of break down the silos. Do you feel, or the students feel, that this project has sort of created a larger school community amongst the grades even, so that there's sort of like a similar, almost like theme for the school?
Does anybody want
Just out of
to answer that?
curiosity.
Yes, definitely. So it was my sophomore year when we read the book Furia that Giselle talked about, but it was her freshman year, and we were able to connect throughout the grades because we were all reading this book together. So it didn't matter what grade, what level, if you were in honors, AP, regular, everyone was reading this book. So it just brought a sense of community that we could all talk to each other and share ideas on this book that we're reading.
And when you talk about community, it's not just the students. So our staff all read the book as well, from the principal on down, to be able to have those conversations and participate. We'll all be present when the author is visiting us this year. We have a unique opportunity. We aren't always able to get that. But from adults all the way through all of our students, we have a copy of the book this year for every single person in our school community.
That's interesting. So you've got the idea of sort of breaking down silos amongst the grades of students, but also amongst the departments within the school community. That's really interesting. And then just another question I had in terms of the actual space. The use of the library, I think it might have been Christian who mentioned it, but we heard I think it was last month, we heard from students at a different school district talking about this idea of creating like safe spaces. It sounds to me like the library has sort of functioned as at least having some concept of a safe space. Could you or could anyone sort of expand on that concept?
I can. So, how do I put this into words? The Media Center has given me, personally at least, a good place to go because, well, I have been transferring schools my whole life, and I moved to Allen Park last year, and to be honest, the cafeteria can seem isolating when you first move to a new school. So going there during lunch really helped me, at least, to help my sister, well, even though she's not here with us, to help my sister get more motivation for school. She met new people there. She has a bunch of new friends now. I mean, overall, from what I've seen and what from my sister's seen, and from just people I know, it has brought people together. It's brought people apart, probably, too. But, I mean, overall, it's been a good place for people to go. People can just sit there, relax. People can talk to other people. You can talk to the librarians, other people. I don't know whose office it is in there besides Miss Lambert, but there's other offices to talk with other faculty members. So, I mean, overall, I think it is just a safe space for anyone to go, and I don't know, like, how else to word it, I guess, but...
I use the library, so I'm taking an independent study class, which means that I don't technically have a first hour. I'm doing it by myself on an online course, and I use the library as a study space. I sit in there and I get my work done, and I can take my class in there. And then there's also great to talk to the librarians if I ever need help, and our media specialist has helped me so much when I've kind of struggled, because it is an independent class, but that's not what I'm used to yet. I'm used to having a teacher there to help me all the time, but with Miss Lambert, I know that there's always someone there if I need it.
So you guys actually have more than one librarian in your media?
We have a full-time library para.
Okay, that's fabulous.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful. So she manages most of the circulation and helps with a lot of our processing. And that also frees me up to go to classes to teach without having to close the library because she's there all of the day.
That's amazing. Just one last idea I just wanted to flesh out. You guys touched on the idea of being able to discern between, different kinds of information, disinformation, misinformation, what have you. I just thought that was really interesting because there's a lot of talk now about, the dangers of social media and, are people able to discern? And I think there's even, some research that, a lot of adults are having a hard time discerning between different types of information, what have you. And it sounds to me like you're really getting some foundational skills about how to consume information, which is, I think, really, really important. I think there's some sense that, if you read something, it must be true. And I think what you guys are learning, which I think is really an important skill, is that you're reading things, but also taking the next step to sort of learn how to characterize information, which is, I think, just an amazing skill. Could you guys sort of expand on that?
I really do agree with you, just because we are in an era where everywhere you look, you're always going to find some sort of source that either tries to display a topic of the news or really just discuss something. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything too, like, a hot topic anyways. I mean, sometimes people try to look at an article and they'll just think, oh, this person likely has a major in journalism from college, even though we don't really look at it. But after, our activities with Miss Lambert, my government class partnered up with a librarian, and we had a whole unit on misinformation and disinformation where we looked at how to just look up the author, see how biased a source can be, and if we should trust that source. And really just the big focus of everything is don't believe everything you see. Always try to look at what's behind, the picture. And sometimes it could either be good or bad, but regardless, even when I graduate, I'm going to be using that. I'm going to be able to make decisions based on more factual information and make a well-rounded and really thoughtful move in my life.
Do you feel that having that knowledge gives you more freedom and more choices?
I definitely think so, just because not everyone, really just thinks about how, information can either manipulate or confuse you into some sort of path, or, just having that ability to be in your mind, just, in your mind that, I keep saying that, but I'm sorry, that you can trust yourself and you can trust your intuition, that you can just look at everything and make your own decisions by yourself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Mr. McMillan.
I guess I would just like to encourage the students to be cautious when you're trying to discern misinformation and disinformation, especially when the government or the government-funded people are trying to help you through that, because in history, there's nobody that lies more than the government. They've lied us into wars, Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, the Snowden files, the Twitter files. Twitter files show how public health officials lied to us about COVID, to a very extreme sense, Snowden files, how the government takes away our freedoms and our liberties. And remember that, censorship is done by dictators and authoritarians. It's not done by people that want to encourage the free exchange of ideas. So I would just say that you need to be careful who is telling you what is misinformation and disinformation. So that would be my only thoughts right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Giselle?
I would like to add something about the censorship that he stated. Most of us here are in research class, and when I was researching, I was talking about the war on drugs. So most of my documents were censored from the school. So I had to rely mostly on biased websites. But my teacher, Mr. Bannock, he showed me, even though a website may be biased, you can still figure out the real truth from the links or the sources or the primary sources that he taught us. So I think it is really important that most students should be able to tell the difference between biased and unbiased websites when it comes to research. So Ms. Lambert was able to teach us that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Thank you, Giselle. Other questions, comments, concerns, board members? Going once. Mr. Bullock.
This one, you guys did a great presentation. I grew up a library hermit, so to speak, at school and in the public library, and hearing how we've gone from the card catalog and the Dewey Decimal System to this, I'm just like, yeah, I get it now. So I liked it.
So, Mr. Bullock, thank you for sharing that. A number of us grew up similarly afflicted, and are proud of it. One of the most chilling moments that I've had in this position was hearing from a group of young people with whom I met in a school library. A young person asked me what I thought about a school that only opened its library when there were guests in the school meeting with children. No librarian, no open library as a rule. Really hurt my heart in a pretty substantial way. But by contrast, this presentation more than makes up for that in certain ways, and it shows what we have to aspire to across the state. Fully staffed libraries, libraries that have diverse collections, libraries and that are places of refuge for people like Mr. Bullock and you and I, you and me, who want an opportunity to catch our breath during the school day, places where you can learn to research, places where you can explore diverse materials and draw your own conclusions ultimately about what those materials say, because after all, you're only in school for so long, and then we send you out into the broad world to sift through materials, books by yourselves. Principal, you should be very proud of your
they're great.
Of your students.
If you look at this library, it's very obvious. It's classroom. It's not just a separate off collection of books. It's learning is taking place there. And that was before the presentations when I was talking to Ms. Lambert, her saying that there were 20 students who would have liked to have been at this table, and they had to whittle it down to 4. So there is a big audience at that school that really appreciates what's happening in that library.
And Dr. Rice, that comes from our community and the values they have, our Board of Education supporting, our superintendent and central office working to make sure that we have the opportunity to have a librarian and to have that space and to dedicate that space. So it's not just one. It's obviously for all of our students, but it comes from a large amount of people who value that in our community and have worked hard to make sure that that opportunity is available.
We need more librarians in the state, more libraries in the state, more diverse collections in the state as well. Mr. Skiba, Ms. Lambert, students, you rocked it out of the park. Thank you very much. Giselle, Crimson, Christian, Amelia, you knocked it out of the park. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board, it's 10:13. The next item on today's agenda is a presentation on Michigan's top 10 strategic plan, goal number 8, provision of adequate and equitable school funding. During this presentation, we will hear information from our presenters, Dr. Diane Golzinski, Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Finance and Operations, and Mr. Spencer Simmons, the Director of the Office of Financial Management. Also present in the room are or will be Mr. Phil Boone, Supervisor of State Aid and School Finance Unit in the Office of Financial Management, and Mr. Chad Urchik, Specialist in State Aid and School Finance Unit at the Office of Financial Management. I also see Ms. Terry Rink, our Director of the Office of Special Education as well. I'd like to recognize their input and work to assist with this presentation. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Good morning, board. It's great to be with you. As Dr. Rice said, my name is Diane Golzinski, and I am Deputy Superintendent, and I have with me the Spencer Simmons, who is our Director of the Office of Financial Management. Today, we are here to talk specifically about goal number 8, provide adequate and equitable school funding. Just as a reminder, these are the metrics that we said we would work with for this goal. We are looking specifically, is there a weighted formula for poverty? And does that formula match the School Finance Research Collaborative recommendation? And what is the difference between those? We're looking at the same for English learners, the same for students with disabilities, and the same for career and technical education. For GSRP, we're looking at if there's dedicated funding amount per child for GSRP, and then is there state-provided funding for transportation? So those are the metrics that we'll be looking at today, specifically how the state budget relates to the SFRC recommendations.
Morning, Board. Since 2015, there have been several school finance studies that have been done. In January of 2018, the School Finance Research Collaborative released the largest and most detailed of those studies. They did have recommendations that additional studies were done to highlight 3 specific areas. Those areas having underfunding were high concentrations of poverty, transportation cost, and capital cost. Since that point in time, the SFRC recommendations have begun to become incorporated into the state school aid budgets over the last 2 years. The Opportunity Index to fund higher concentrations of poverty, Section 31A, the Transportation Study and Funding, Section 22L, and the Infrastructure Study and Funding, Section 11Y and 11X, are examples of that. Please note, after the studies over 11Y are done for infrastructure are completed, those districts would potentially qualify for the funding in Section 11X, in addition to the consolidation of Section 12C. This next chart, you're going to see the total foundation allowance over a 5-year period. As you can tell, from 2019, the foundation allowance has increased from $8,409 to the amount of 2024 of $9,608. To look at those 2 years up close of 2022 to 2024, it's a total increase of $908, or a 10.4% increase over those 2 years. The base cost to educate a general education student done by the SFRC is different than the overall total foundation allowance that's provided by the state of Michigan. The reason for that is the base cost incorporates multiple funding streams, and the pupil foundation amount does not use that same exact methodology. In 2018, the study had a base cost established of $9,590. In 2021, they had an enhanced recommendation of a base cost of $10,421. And in 2023, to adjust for inflation, that amount would be at $11,793. On this next screen, you're going to see the 2023 pre-K through 12 grade funding mechanism in the state of Michigan. It consists of the local revenue at $4.2 billion, the state revenue at $17.6 billion, and the federal revenue at $2.56 billion, for a grand total of roughly $24.4 billion.
Moving on to child poverty, children living in a family that is 185% of the federal poverty level or below are considered to be economically disadvantaged or living in poverty. The SFRC recommended that these children receive 35% above the recommended base funding, acknowledging the additional financial strain on a district educating children in poverty. So with that additional 35% above the base cost of $11,793 per student for 7,075, try again, Dan, 775,404 students in Michigan, the total cost would be $3.2 billion. As the building becomes more populated with students in poverty, that building has greater financial needs above the SFRC base. In order for a building to qualify for higher funding, we would have to set a poverty threshold. If we set that threshold at 75%, it would cost the state $598 million. However, if we set that threshold at 90%, it would cost the state $231 million. In the FY24 budget, we saw a $204.5 million increase in Section 31A for our economically disadvantaged students, which is an 86% increase from what was allocated in FY22. In addition, as you all know, the FY24 budget attempted to acknowledge the concept that the higher the poverty concentration, the greater the financial assistance that is needed. So an opportunity index was created where districts are receiving more funding as their concentration of poverty increases. The next category is English learners. The SFRC recommendation would have us spending more than $750 million on this category alone. The good news is that we have increased the funding for our English learners significantly with $13.2 million in the current state aid budget, and there are a number of line items in which a district can use the funding to assist the English learners.
Students with disabilities. In 2024, there was a $154.9 million increase to support students with disabilities, excluding Section 51E, which is a special education foundation payment. Looking at Section 51F at $90.2 million, which originally was the special education cost reimbursement, and the transition from that being rolled into Section 51E, which is now the special education foundation payment, you'll see over a 2-year period, the actual amount went from $90.2 million in 2022 to $336.2 million in 2023 to $415.2 million in 2024. That in total is a $325 million increase, or a 360% increase over a 2-year period. This next slide, you're going to see the GSRP historic funding from 2021 at $7,250 for 30 weeks of instruction to $9,608 in 2024. For expanded GSRP of up to 5 days or 36 weeks of instruction, that flexibility would have a payment per eligible child of $11,530. In 2023, the SFRC recommended for universal preschool costs would be at roughly $17,539 per eligible child. The governor's recommended goal of hitting 87,000 children would result in $1,526 million.
On the transportation side, the SFRC released their recommended transportation costs in 2022 based on 2018-2019 data. Their recommendation was for $402 million. Adjusting that number for inflation, the SFRC number would be $487 million. Prior to FY24, there was no funding dedicated to general education pupil transportation. In FY24, thanks to the work of the SFRC and the department, the state budget now includes $125 million and requires a study to determine the appropriateness of the SFRC recommendation. Moving now to capital costs. The U.S. Government Accountability Office found that low poverty districts spend more per pupil on capital expenditures than high poverty districts nationally. When we look at the school bond proposals on the November 23 ballot here in Michigan, 25 of the 45 were passed, with the success rate being higher in the wealthier districts. In fact, if we look at those 25 that passed and compare the 4 highest poverty districts to the 4 lowest poverty districts, you can see a significant difference in the per student amount passed. The SFRC recommended a placeholder amount of $676 million until a capital study was completed. The SFRC recommended $400 per student until that study could be completed, and that study is now happening as a result of Section 11Y of the State School Aid Act. It's important to note that the total capital cost reported to the department in 2021-22 was $4.3 billion.
Progress towards our metrics. First question, is there a weighted formula for poverty, English learners, students with disabilities, and career and technical education? Increasingly and implicitly, yes, there is a weighted formula for students in poverty, English learners, and students with disabilities. There have been major increases in these areas over the last 2 years, and implicitly, we're building out a weighted formula associated with each of these groups of young people. Relative to career and technical education, although it's true that the number of budget lines have increased associated with CTE, they're small and even aggregate and don't rise to the level of weighted funding for CTE implicitly or explicitly. The state does provide funding for transportation. The Michigan Department of Education advocated strongly for the SFRC recommendation with the state legislature. Last winter and spring, $125 million was approved and added to Section 22L to support transportation cost. Next question, does the state provide funding, or is there a dedicated funding amount per child for GSRP? Yes, there is dedicated funding per child for GSRP. As I discussed in the previous slide, 30 weeks of instruction for 2024 is at $9,608 per eligible child. For expanded coverage of 36 weeks of instruction for 2024, that amount would be $11,530. Does it match the School Finance Research Collaborative SFRC recommended? The answer to that question is no, it does not. The SFRC does recommend for universal preschool a cost of $17,539 per child. This next slide is a comparison of the actual funding in 2023 based upon the comparison of what SFRC recommends. To the left, you may recognize or remember the actual chart that was for the state of Michigan's 2023 total school funding. Local revenue, state revenue, and federal revenue at $24.4 billion. The SFRC recommends on the low end, the state should be funded at $26.4 billion. And on the high end, it should be funded at over $30.4 billion. In summary, in spite of having two of the best years of funding in 2023 and 24 in state's history since Proposal A, education remains underfunded in the state. Based on the SFRC recommendation, depending on the results of the capital cost study and the transportation study, Michigan schools continue to be underfunded on the low end by roughly $2 billion, and on the high end by $6 billion annually.
So presenters, that was a lot to chew on in 14 minutes. We appreciate that, that quick tour of Michigan school finance. Thank you very much. A lot packed into a very short period of time. Board members, questions or comments? Questions or comments? Ms. Snyder, Ms. Lipton.
So a line of questions here. So does the School Finance Research Collaborative recommend that the increased dollars assigned to infrastructure and transportation be legally attached to specific infrastructure and transportation goals?
Does the school finance recommend that?
Yes.
I don't.
Goals, I can't.
Where's Chad? I don't see Chad. I can get you the answer to that.
Okay. And then I would ask further, once those dollars are received by those schools, does SFRC recommend yearly accountability with site visit evaluations that those goals are reached?
So the SFRC study, which was over 300 pages long, had 3 areas for further review. 2 of those 3 areas are the 2 that you mentioned, capital costs and transportation costs. SFRC was silent as to the use of those dollars once received, but was clear that there was underfunding in the state of those 2 areas, thought that they needed to be studied, and they needed to be funded in some way, shape, or form.
So SFRC is recommending that that school funding be increased in transportation and infrastructure, but not that there be oversight or accountability related to those dollars. Is Michigan Department of Education recommending that those increased dollars be attached to specific goals related to infrastructure and transportation?
All right, so that was a lot. Let me take the two separately. With respect to transportation, the January 2018 study simply said that we need to study transportation more. It had a placeholder per pupil amount in the study and said we need to study this area more. In November of 2022, so a year and 2 months ago, SFRC came out and said, this is what we think needs to be done in transportation. We've studied it. This is what needs to be done with respect to transportation. Michigan Department of Education agreed that transportation needed to be funded, advocated for that with the state legislature, with the governor. Ultimately, there was $125 million appropriated in the fiscal year 24 budget with oversight and with an additional study for review about how to best distribute those dollars. And that study is ongoing right now.
Right.
That's on transportation. With respect to capital, the January 2018 study was clear about one thing, that there were transportation costs that were not being funded in the state. And so in certain regards, I beg your pardon, capital, yes. Okay. There were capital challenges that either weren't being funded or were being funded in a fashion at the expense of local classrooms because some local school districts weren't able to pass a millage or pass a sinking fund. The legislature 2 years ago in the fiscal year 23 budget passed in the summer of 22, passed Section 11Y, which required a study of the specific needs statewide and also passed some funding in an infrastructure and consolidation fund, $475 million, and more than half of which could be spent on one of the elements, infrastructure, and then the other element as well. That study is ongoing. We have met with the Oakland schools and the Oakland School Foundation, which is overseeing this. We did have some conversation with the board about this a month ago, and we feel strongly that dollars that are allocated for infrastructure go for infrastructure. They not end up in a broad pot of money.
So feeling strongly is very different than it being an accountable process.
True.
So when we pass bonds at a local level, those dollars legally have to be used for that specified purpose. Mm-hmm. So we're at a place, what I'm hearing right now is that the legislature has passed this idea of let's study it, let's know what needs to be done, but let's not make sure it gets done. And the bond process kind of protects that legally. So I guess what I would put out there for SFRC and the department is to be leaders in that area of, okay, not only are we going to research what's needed, state what's needed, get the dollars for what's needed, but make sure the dollars are actually used to get it done.
A good point. And we've made that with the legislature. The legislative language in 11X associated with the funding, associated with the 11Y, is quite clear that those are capital dollars for capital expenses. I don't anticipate that will change, but we will remain vigilant. It's an important point. Ms. Snyder, back to you.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ms. Lipton.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know I've said this before, this is an issue that's just really near and dear to my heart. When I was in the legislature, I remember talking to people after I learned how schools were funded in the state, just sort of querying, does anyone really know what the true costs of educating a child are in Michigan, so that we sort of know, like where are we at and where do we want to go? And, people just thought that was the funniest question. They just sort of laughed at me and said, oh, we really don't want to know. But I do think that it was important to know, and it really took a long time. I mean, it was a bill that was the first bill that I introduced and one of the last bills that got passed 6 years later. And even then, it took a long time for it to get implemented and finalized. But I guess what I want to emphasize is, do you think, one of the criticisms that I got really from everybody was that, number one, we really don't want to know what the true costs of educating a child are, because heaven forbid the public might know that we're really not funding things appropriately. I didn't really like that argument. And then another argument I got from other people was that, well, you just, want to just throw money at things. And, just throwing money at things is just, is going to be your solution. But I didn't really like that argument either, because my thought was, a guide that tells us, number one, what our needs are, and number two, where we might want to aspire to. As we can see here in this document, it doesn't necessarily mean that the money is going to be appropriated. You've even shown here the gaps. But do you believe that as a state, we are making more informed decisions about what our needs are based on this information, rather than the decisions that were made proposal A time, where it was just, this is the pot of money, this is the number of students, let's divide the top by the bottom, and just sort of spread it out like that? Do you feel that, at least with this information, number one, we are certainly not throwing money anywhere because we can make informed decisions about what our needs are, and number two, that having more information is actually better for education of our students than worse?
I do feel that we are making progress. As Dr. Rice has said a number of times, different students have different needs, and different needs have different costs. And the budget has definitely shown that we are making progress toward that. But as you said, we've identified some gaps as it relates to what the SFRC recommends. And so what we're doing is continuing to learn and advocate for what those different needs are. I think that we have a budget that definitely is set up in a way that could help us achieve that with time.
As to transportation, my sense is that I think a lot of times people will say that studies are biased, or, oh, there's, sort of, an inherent bias baked in. But it seems to me that based on at least what we heard from the field with regard to transportation, I mean, we literally heard from rural districts that we're spending an enormous amount in gasoline expenses to get their children to school. And it seems to me that we can have some comfort in the legitimacy of this study as really reflecting reality of our local districts and what they are feeling out in the field.
Yes. It is better than where we were a year ago when we didn't have state funding for transportation. The study is definitely looking at the data that we have and how that is getting us closer to the point where we want to be to help districts properly fund transportation to school.
And then just one final question. When I was sort of on this journey during my time in the legislature and beyond, I became very convinced of the notion that although we like to think of all children being equal, and certainly there is sort of there's strength to that we also vis-a-vis funding need to be thinking about equity, and that the costs of certain populations are just greater, and you've identified that in terms of children living in concentrated poverty, students where immigrant students, what have you, and we need special education students. We know now that there are certain populations that need more resources to get them to the finish line, if you will. What I was curious, though, was the CTE breakout. I wasn't familiar with that concept as sort of an equitable argument. Is there some concept that CTE, I mean, I'm familiar with CTE programs and the need for them, but I was just curious that that was sort of included as a need in the same way that high concentrations of poverty, ESL, special ed. Could you just help me understand that?
So I know that different students take different paths along the way. And what the metrics for our state education plan state is that CTE is one of those areas that if we strengthen, we can provide multiple opportunities for different students. As you said, different students have different needs, right? Okay. And so looking at that, we need to put a focus on that and how are we funding it? As Spencer said, we have a large number of line items, but a small amount of money in those line items for CTE. So how does that actually relate to what the SFRC recommended in that area is an area of the strategic education plan that we still need to do some work.
Okay, so maybe sort of working with a population of students that maybe are more project-based learners, that maybe need to sort of work in a more real-life environment as opposed to sort of the more books and, okay, thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So all of what you said, I think, is correct, what both of you said about CTE. The other piece with respect to SFRC is that CTE costs more than the average cost per student. And SFRC recommended that required an additional 10% weight. And so we focus on it in this presentation because SFRC focused on it in its study. It was one of the elements where weighted funding was perceived to be necessary. That is to say, over and above funding was necessary. So it wasn't simply the three categories we typically think of, students with disabilities, English learners, economically disadvantaged students. It was also preschool. It was also career and technical education. It was also the issue of rural equity as well. Transportation is a matter of rural equity because the distances are greater, the cost per child greater, the adverse impact to the classroom greater in a rural jurisdiction than in an urban jurisdiction. Oftentimes when we talk about equity, people hear that as a concept that more positively affects urban districts than rural or suburban. And that may be true in certain regards. For transportation, of course, it's the reverse.
So I just have one more question. It just got me thinking in terms of our last presentation regarding libraries. Do we know how many schools, and maybe the answer is no, but how many school districts don't have a, I don't want to say working library, but that don't have a media center that's functioning?
I don't.
Or do we? I mean, do we know how many? Is that information that we even collect?
I'll find out
in terms of like what schools even have a library.
We'll find out.
So we have some data on this. We have rep report data, registered ed personnel data.
Like a hired media specialist? Or,
Correct.
Okay.
So it's historically, it's been 2 points of time in a year. It's more significant than that this year. Is it perfect data? Not. Does it give us a little bit of a sense of where we are? Yes. The story I tell is that when I moved from being a superintendent in northern New Jersey, low tax, low spend jurisdiction for northern New Jersey, we had a media specialist in every one of 14 elementary schools, 2 in each of the 2 middle schools, 3 at the high school. When I came to Southwest Michigan, above average tax, above average spend jurisdiction in Southwest Michigan, notwithstanding the fact that it was an urban jurisdiction. We had precisely 2 elementary librarians for 17 elementary schools. The consequence of underfunding of public schools over a long period of time meant that a number of things that in other jurisdictions in other states are considered to be necessary became optional or superfluous or additions that could no longer be afforded. As we continue to improve our funding, one hopes, one imagines that there will be a refunding of things like libraries, librarians, leaning into literacy at the school level. We really think that this is critical.
So so is your sense that maybe like 50% don't have libraries? Or, I'm just curious, do we have even like a back of the envelope?
My sense is that every school will say that it has a school library, but that it is a school library and that it is fully accessible, fully open, with a certificated librarian in place to help develop the collection, work with young people, as Ms. Lambert works with young people. That's a very different story. There are far fewer districts that have certified librarians.
But we don't really have a good handle on it.
We do not have a perfect handle on it, no, because, so for example, we'll have districts that'll have a librarian for 4 elementary schools or for 6 schools in a district. They'll have a single librarian who rotates around or we'll have districts that have a library clerk or a library aide. Ms. Lambert referred to a library paraprofessional.
Yep.
These are good people. They're often very knowledgeable, very smart, very heartfelt, well-intentioned, not necessarily well-trained to be a media specialist or a librarian.
Yep. That's at least, I know that this is not a snapshot by any stretch, but in the Promise Zone communities that I am familiar with, I can think of most of the districts, at most they have like a volunteer or a parapro. I can't think of any of them that actually have what these kids talked about in Allen Park. So my sense is it's probably a pretty low number that would meet the bar. But I don't know. I'm just curious if that was
from our travels, you see librarians as a rule in more well-to-do districts that don't have to spend on a number of other supports for young people and have the latitude, the financial flexibility to spend on a librarian in a library. That's one of the adverse impacts, unintended, but one of the adverse impacts of underfunding our schools, that you tend to underfund the library space, librarians as well. Other questions? Mr. McMillan.
When I look in this presentation, as far as when it talks about per pupil funding, where's the slide that talks about all sources of income, revenue, per pupil funding? Is that in here? federal, local, state?
That hasn't been broken down.
No, that hasn't. As a matter of fact, if it would be, it would tell a different story. So, leaving that information out, I think, is telling, unfortunate, and deceptive, quite frankly. If we had all sources, we would know that per pupil funding in 2020, according to the National Public Education Finance Survey, the U.S. Census Bureau shows $18,000, over $18,000 in 2020. I'm sure it's a lot more than that for all sources, compared to 11.3 thousand in all sources in 2003, 60% increase. So the total funding is well over 100% more than what, I don't know about well over, but close to 100% more than what you are indicating. Detroit schools went from 8,500 per pupil to over 19,000, 129% increase. Saginaw went from 10,000 in 2003 per pupil to 16,000, over 16,000, 60% increase. Now Rochester only had a 28% increase, very small, from 11.3 thousand. Now it's below the other two I mentioned, 14.5 thousand per student. So, I do think that we should probably be telling the whole story and not part of it. And as far as my colleague, former legislator, brings up the bias that people don't want to see what total spending is, I don't think anybody is concerned about showing what total spending. I think total spending is very subjective. Does it include a ton of overhead, a ton of administrative costs? We've seen administrative costs go way over, or the increase be huge and significant compared to what is being spent in the classroom. Republicans have long advocated for 65% to the classroom and always get voted down. Also, that study that was done based on the 2014 funding that was passed at 3 o'clock in the morning on the last day of the legislature, where I was there, was written, the legislation that made that study possible was written by the Democrats and written in a way that only one company could qualify. So clearly, they were wanting their biased company to be doing the quote-unquote study. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear. And then whenever there's talk of funding, there's the charter schools that serve tons of poor children are never talked about as far as adequacy or anything that should be fair. They're left out of any bonds. They're left out of a lot of other funding, and so I just feel like I need to mention that as well. Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. McMillan. We appreciate your sharing. A few things. I think slide 24 gets at your point. Slide 24 notes the three sources broadly of total revenue, local, state, and federal on one side, and on the other side, the costing out of the SFRC recommendations. So there is a slide here that gets at all costs.
Per pupil funding, though.
So that's one thing. Well, the per pupil funding is embedded into those local and state revenue numbers.
Why hide it?
It's hard to argue it's hidden. It's on slide 24.
Per pupil.
As far as the studies are concerned, I can't speak to the 2014 lame duck session. What I can say is, though, that there was a 2015 study by the Upjohn Institute. There was a 2016 study that was funded by the state legislature. There was a 2017 study. There was a 2018 study done by SFRC. The 2017 study, by the way, was co-chaired by the then Lieutenant Governor of the state, Lieutenant Governor Calley. 2018 was SFRC. 2019 was the MSU study. 2020 was Ed Trust Midwest study. choose your favorite study. Each of them has shown that we're underfunding public education. You note the increase in funding for particular local school districts, and you cite a 60% increase over 20 years. This is below the rate of inflation, and this is why
equal to it.
And this is why Michigan has had the lowest total revenue increase, inflation adjusted, between 1995 and 2015 in the nation, a fact from which we continue to attempt to catch up and address over a period of time. The only other thing that I'd like to point out is that charter schools are considered public schools, as well they should be. They're funded with public dollars in this study. So when we talk about the costs of public schools, charter schools are in here. When we talk about the revenue associated with public schools, charter schools are in here. It's not that they're being ignored. They're very much a part of this study, a part of the 840 local school districts in the state, a part of the, when you add in the ISDs, close to 900 school districts in the state. Other questions or comments by board members, please?
Just a real quick question. And I'm thinking that we don't have the answer to this, and I think it was the MSU study that showed that Michigan was at the bottom when it came to equitable funding. Do we know what our rank is across the country?
So what the MSU/David Arson study showed was that during that 20-year period, from 1995 to 2015, we were dead last in the nation in total revenue growth, inflation adjusted, and we were third to last in the nation in per pupil revenue growth, inflation adjusted. That's a special place to be. It is true that, to Dr. Pugh, to slide 25, slide after the slide to which I referred with respect to Mr. McMillan's comment, we've had the two very best education budget years in the state's history, back to back in the Prop A era, that is to say the 30 years post-Proposal A, 1994. So that's the good news. Those have been outstanding budgets. The bad news is that you can't make it up all at once. And even if you could, you wouldn't want to make it up all at once. So we've got a long way to go before we sleep, to paraphrase Frost. Great two budgets, great start, a long way to go. And some of that is a function of the capital concerns to which Ms. Snyder referred, and the transportation costs. But some of that is associated with the underfunding of preschool and poor children, students with disabilities, and English learners, and just base underfunding of schools across the state. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
Bud? Please. I would just like to point out that private schools spend about 50% of what, on average, public schools do statewide in all sources. And I'm sure their growth has been equal to or less than the public schools. And I know that public schools take all comers, and but that's an extra 100% of funding. So I think maybe more choice would help increase quality and decrease costs. Again, so much is spent in overhead and administration. The private schools make sure they keep that down because of competition. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing the citation for private school costs. I'm not aware of a study on private school costs or data associated with private school costs globally in the state, but I would like to see that. I would note that private schools, on average, don't educate the mix of young people that public schools do. Public schools are Emma Lazarus schools. They're give us you're tired, you're poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We educate everyone in public schools as well we should. Presenters, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Keep on keeping on. Board, it is 10:58, and we are going to move to a presentation on partnership districts. This presentation will feature an update on partnership districts. Following the presentation, the board will have an opportunity for further conversation and questions. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Susie Carnell, Chief Deputy Superintendent, and Ms. Gloria Chapman, Director of the Office of Partnership Districts. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice, and good morning, State Board of Education members. Ms. Gloria Chapman and I are here to provide you with a presentation on Partnership District, as Dr. Rice mentioned. This presentation is an update for some of you, and for others, it is an overview. With this updated information and overview, you will see and hear information on the funding and support for partnership districts. We will end the presentation by focusing on several highlights from partnership districts. So let's begin with the legislation that directs and guides our work. The Office of Partnership Districts follows requirements in the federal Every Student Succeed Act, otherwise known as ESSA, and the Michigan Compiled Law. ESSA requires states to provide technical assistance to each LEA, local education agency, serving a significant number of schools identified for comprehensive or targeted support and improvement. To meet this obligation, Michigan provides technical assistance through Partnership District Model. The Partnership District Model uses a collaborative approach to facilitate academic achievement improvement and helps to build capacity of the district and its partner to develop and sustain turnaround efforts.
Good morning. Michigan Compiled Law 388, Section 1622P deals directly with identification and requirements for partnership districts. A district or public school academy assigned as a partnership district must have a signed 3-year partnership agreement, which includes measurable academic outcomes that the district or school will achieve after 18 and 36 months. Go ahead. A district or public school academy, Section 22P also requires a district or public school academy to have a signed partnership agreement in place no later than 90 days after the date of assignment as a partnership district. Section 22P also requires measurable outcomes that include outcomes to put students on track to meet or exceed grade level proficiency, at least one proficiency or growth outcome based on state assessment, at least one proficiency or growth outcome based on benchmark assessment, and outcomes to measure high school graduation rates. Finally, outcomes that measure attendance rates. This is a sample 18-month interim target benchmark. During the 2023-24 school year, at least 40% of students in grades K through 8 will meet their growth target on the spring Reading Northwestern Evaluation Association measure of academic progress growth. A sample of a 36-month in-target outcome. During the 24-25 school year, at least 50% of students, grades K through 8, will meet their growth target on the Spring Reading NWEA Math Growth Assessment. The purpose of the partnership model is to improve student achievement levels in the lowest performing schools in Michigan. Within the purpose are direct and indirect efforts to improve student achievement. Examples of direct efforts include school board training, collaboratively working with districts and developing an agreement, providing timely and targeted comprehensive support in such areas as literacy, math, and attendance, reducing barriers, and identifying appropriate resources. Examples of indirect efforts to improve student achievement may include school board training or teacher recruitment and retention efforts. While all collaborative partners play an integral role in supporting the partnership district or school, the intermediate school district or the regional educational service agencies, along with community partners, are key collaborative partner members. Collaborative partners work together in supporting the district or schools to maximize resources and support. Partnership districts supported by the Office of Partnership Districts are districts having schools in the bottom 5% and/or schools with a 4-year graduation rate of 67% or less. Districts in a partnership agreement may also have schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement that do not meet partnership agreement entrance criteria. For example, alternative education schools, virtual schools, and/or schools identified for additional targeted support. Or targeted support and improvement. The Office of Partnership Districts supports any schools within the partnership district identified for support. Currently, there are 47 partnership districts. Within these districts, there are a total of 142 schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement. Of these 142, 105 schools met the criteria for entering a partnership district. Overall, 135 students are enrolled in the 47 partnership districts, regardless of the school identification status. The alignment between the agreements and the Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan is illustrated on this slide. Across all partnership agreements, you will find emphasis on improved proficiency and growth in English language arts and mathematics, improved graduation rates, and regular student attendance, supporting the whole child, and increasing teacher recruitment and retention. The Partnership Agreement Liaisons, or PALs, are an integral component in the support provided to partnership districts. The role of the PAL is to remove barriers in communication and identify appropriate resources. The PAL is a navigator, a communications broker, a neutral facilitator, and the district's MDE point of contact. PALs are intentionally and purposefully assigned to work at the district level to ensure consistency in messaging. Dr. Cornell?
So realizing that the need of a re-identified district is different from the need of a district that's newly identified, each district is assigned one of 3 levels of support. And some of the board members remember this slide when I was here with Dr. Bill Pearson. So there's 3 levels. There's intense, essential, and fundamental. The intense level of support is a district that previously had a partnership agreement and has 1 or more schools re-identified for CSI, comprehensive support and improvement. The essential level of support is for a district with a school with newly identified CSI school, comprehensive support and improvement schools. And at the fundamental level, there is support to the district that has a partnership agreement due to low graduation rates. This slide shows the level of support for each of the 42 districts. So we have 14 that are receiving intensive support, 24 that are receiving essential support, and 9 that are receiving fundamental support.
The expectations of partnership districts with intensive support are 2 on-site meetings per month. The director or assistant director of OPD participates in writing the partnership agreements and developing the aligned measurable 18-month interim target benchmarks and the 36-month end target outcomes. That will be achieved for each school identified in the partnership agreement. Additionally, the Office of Partnership Districts, intermediate school districts, and districts develop the partnership agreements based on 1, a comprehensive needs assessment utilizing the Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process, or MICIP, and conduct semi-annual presentations on partnership agreement progress at local board meetings. The expectations of partnership districts with essential supports are on-site monthly meetings between the liaison and the district. The remaining 2 bulleted items on this slide are the same as the intensive level of support. Minimally, meetings are held every other month with liaison, district leadership, and ISD personnel. The director or assistant director of OPD conducts quarterly school visits. The expectations of districts receiving fundamental supports include on-site every other meetings between liaison and district leadership. Again, bullets 2 and 3 are the same for all 3 levels. At the fundamental level, at a minimum, quarterly meetings are held on-site with the liaison, district leadership, and ISD personnel. The director or assistant director conducts twice a year school visits. The following slides will discuss the 21H funding for partnership districts. In fiscal year 24, the legislature allocated $6,137,400 and an additional $36 million in supplemental funding to partnership districts. The $36 million is to be dispersed in equal installments of $12 million in each of the 3 fiscal years, 24, 25, and 26. Current partnership districts are eligible for the first 2 years of funding. 2025 identified partnership districts will be eligible for the remaining $12 million in fiscal year 26. The following 3 slides will review the requirements for districts to receive 21H funding. A district described in this subsection is eligible for the funding under the section if the district includes at least 1 school that has been identified as low performing under the approved federal accountability system. A district, again described in this subsection, must do all of the following to be eligible for funding. Within 90 days of assignment, complete the comprehensive needs assessment. 2, develop an academic and financial operation or intervention plan that has been approved by the superintendent and addresses the needs identified in the comprehensive needs assessment. C, craft academic goals that put pupils on track to meet or exceed grade level proficiency. Increase the high school graduation rates, reduce class sizes, and improve attendance rates. D, provide access to training for district leadership, including but not limited to the superintendent of the chief administrator and school board members or board of directors on areas of fiscal and policy matters. The pie chart illustrates an analysis of 1-year district requests for funding, and this was for the $6,137,400, which was dispersed to districts for data and the $137,400 was dispersed to districts for a data analytic tool. Examples of this include iReady, NWEA, or an add-on feature for a district student information system. $6 million in funding was awarded and dispersed in December 2023. So 9% for increased instructional time, 73% you can see for other expenditures that directly impact student achievement and cannot be paid from existing district financial sources. 17% for professional development for teachers, district and or school leadership, and 1% for teacher mentors. Supplemental funding was allocated to districts in fiscal year 24. Of the $12 million for year 1 of the 2-year request, 13% was for increased instructional time. 73% was for expenditures that directly impact student achievement and cannot be paid again from existing district financial sources. 11% for professional development for teachers, district and or school leadership, and 3% was for teacher mentor. The next two slides will illustrate examples of the supplemental funding requests. For both allocations, 73% of the funds are being used by districts for other expenditures that directly impact student achievement and cannot be paid from existing district financial resources. Examples of the other expenditures include social emotional learning, diverse libraries, staff, for example, counselors, school social workers, family engagement, technology, and also chronic absenteeism. The next two slides illustrate how partnership districts are using 21H funds, and these are highlights. Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System is an example of Section 21H funds used to provide Board of Education and Board of Directors training. The Public School Academy has conducted one joint board training and one training for the Charter School Board. The training includes identifying roles and responsibilities within organizational structure and creating a strategic plan. Muskegon Heights Public School Academy is now working on creating a scope and sequence for future board trainings. Trainings are or will continue through fiscal year 25. The Pontiac School District has focused in on career and technical education, department and programming, and they are expanding with new pathways, including an education in human services, the teacher cadet program, and their partnership with Oakland University. They're also providing emergency services public safety pathway and are partnering with Oakland Community College. Both are dual enrollment programs. This aligns and supports Pontiac's 36-month in-target outcome. Additional examples of other expenditures include 9 partnership districts that are currently engaging in the Early Warning Intervention Monitoring System, or EWIMS training. These include Beecher Community School District, Bradford Academy, Jackson Public Schools, Mount Clemens Community Schools, Multicultural Academy, Old Redford Academy, Pontiac School District, River Rouge School District, and Romulus Community Schools. EWIMS directly correlates to increased graduation rates. River Rouge School District is another example of professional development and has 2 teachers who recently completed their Grow Your Own program and are now fully certified and were hired by the district. 4 additional individuals are currently enrolled. Detroit Public Schools Community School District collaborates with the University of Michigan and Michigan State University to hire newly certified teachers. 80% of the Detroit Public Schools Community District teachers are persons of color with their Grow Your Own programs to increase teaching staff. Both of these are prime examples of districts working on Strategic Education Plan Goal 7 to increase the numbers of certified teachers in areas of shortage. On January 31st, 2024, OPD is hosting a networking event for partnership districts. The Office of Educator Excellence is presenting on the supports they can provide around teacher recruitment and retainment. The purpose of this is for districts to refine their work in teacher recruitment and retention. Districts will share with each other their best practices and take away next steps needed for their own districts as they prepare for the upcoming school year. Partnership districts will share recruitment and retention best practices that they are finding impactful. EPIC will share out their most recent research finding on the partnership model, and the MIMTSS Technical Center will provide service updates. Partnership districts will soon receive communication on preparing for their 18-month benchmark reviews that begin in the fall. Thank you.
And that's our overview and update for today.
Thank you very much, presenters. We appreciate you. We appreciate the update. Board members, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I've said in the past, I think this is one of our critical oversight that the board provides, and I appreciate the presentation. I wonder, and I know they are involved, but when I look at slide 9 and collaborative partners, how much are parents involved with this? Because I would imagine that, I mean, I would hope, but it might be uncomfortable, so maybe the schools have a disincentive to do this, but I would hope they would, at the very start of this process, when they're named a partnership district, that there's a parent meeting, or maybe several. And it's not something that they may like to do. The district has to say, well, we have been judged to be needing additional special assistance. We don't like to admit that, but this is why. This is why the state is saying it. And, you know, what are your thoughts, parents, about, you know, maybe the evaluation of why they're there, whether there's other metrics that aren't being looked at that might be parents' concerns, and then what metrics might they want to see on the dashboard, you know, being, you know, there's these measurable academic outcomes that are in the legislation, but I've always argued for a parental approval, you know, metric. I think that should be from a third party, you know, surveying and getting it statistically accurate and understanding where the parents, maybe after the meetings, and more than maybe one, make it so that it's very easy to attend. And again, I'm not saying that the districts would do this, you know, overtly, but I think, you know, there's everything, a lot of things are about incentives, and they kind of have an incentive to not admit to the public I mean, it's uncomfortable, you know, this has happened to us, and nobody wants to be in the bottom 5 or have these certain, be in a partnership district. So I think that they may be inclined to not be as engaging with parents. And so I just think that maybe, you know, making sure that that's happening. Is there any, I guess that's my question, is how aggressive is MDE or the districts, or I don't know the exact legislation, to get parental input early on?
So you were correct from the very beginning. At the very inception, once a school district or school is identified, parents are included in this process. And so community meetings may be held. It's up to the superintendent to kind of decide how he or she would like to have that take place. But community is definitely a vital and an integral part of this entire process. And regular updates are provided throughout in terms of board meetings. We require a certain amount of updates, but a superintendent is more than able to provide more regular updates. Again, the superintendents in our partnership districts are in charge of their districts. And so how they see the needs and what needs to be taken into consideration as it relates to the needs of their community, they are the drivers behind the partnership agreement.
Okay. Okay. I just, has there ever been in the history of these partnership agreements any kind of a metric on parental satisfaction or anything like that that would say, here we are at the beginning and here we are at the end, and, you know, parents are happy with how we did this this parental or this partnership agreement, and we're exiting? I don't know. Has there been anything like that?
There hasn't been a survey in the way you're describing.
Okay.
But surveys are taken into consideration. Districts do regular surveys to assess how things are going within the district.
Yeah.
And also taking into what is it that the community needs, what are the community needs?
Yeah.
And so what does that look like in terms of family engagement? And as we're looking at student academic outcomes, we know that chronic absentee is one of our biggest concerns. And so having community members there, having parents engaged to find out what are the barriers to making sure that students are able to get to school on a regular basis. Okay. So those surveys, in terms of, they do take place. We don't, in terms of OPD, necessarily conduct those surveys. Again, that's done through a district level.
Yeah, I'm always, I mean, I see this time and time again, a department or a government will say, we surveyed ourselves and we're all doing great. Or, I would prefer it to be a third party. I think it would be more credible. And then finally, what happens, and I know I've asked this in the past, and what happens if after 36 months they don't hit their metrics? Maybe, I don't think there's been a lot of districts that do, and I know you can adjust metrics, and I don't fault that. I think, as you get into it, you kind of see, you find your way through things, but, what happens if they didn't hit it?
So I'd like to go back and address the earlier question real quickly because I forgot about the EPIC, which is through Michigan State University. And so they do a research, they conduct surveys, they go into the districts, they ask the questions to find out. And that's kind of how we gauge what it is we're doing, how effective we're being. A recent example of that would be the teacher recruitment for our upcoming networking event. It was designed around teacher recruitment and retention because we heard from our partnership districts that's their most critical issue right now. And so we planned it for January so that districts would have ample time to start looking at what their recruitment and retention efforts need to be for the upcoming school year. Okay, so that is and EPIC will share that information with the districts in the upcoming networking event, which is something they regularly do.
And before you move on to the next question, I was a superintendent in a district that was labeled a partnership district. That wasn't the term at the time, but it was a high priority district. And it was one of the things that I wanted to do is meet with my community, survey the parents to see how they felt about the district. That's a label that people are not proud of, right? And word gets out. It's not anything you can hide. The word gets out. And you want parents to feel comfortable that no matter what label that you have for your particular district, if you're in the bottom 5%, that you are doing something to increase student achievement, to make learning better for their students. I also surveyed the parents when they left to figure out, why did you decide to leave the district? I also surveyed the parents to see what we could do better. So as an elementary principal, I did that. As a superintendent, I did that. Parent voice is very important. And we believe that our superintendents feel the same way that are in partnership districts.
And then what happens if they don't hit their 36-month?
So that's reconstitution. And so for a partnership, for traditional and also for a public school academy, the partnership agreement, Round 4, requires that during the process of going through and identifying our goals and the benchmarks, that the district must decide what would be next steps if they don't reach their goals. And so again, with the districts being the driver of this, reconstitution could mean reevaluating their current curriculum. Part of what the partnership agreement allows for, the benchmarks and the outcomes cannot be changed, but the strategies that a district uses can be. So for example, you're in year 2 of your partnership agreement, and as we're talking through these professional development meetings that we meet with, or meet the team with, it comes out that maybe there needs to be another change. We need to look at a strategy. The curriculum is not meeting the needs of the students. And so that being said, if they're in year 2 of a curriculum development, it may be that not enough time was given. And so year 3 comes up, they get re-identified. Does it mean that they necessarily fail, or that the district may need just additional time? So the district has to decide what it is, what area or areas are we still needing to focus on if we are re-identified. It could be building leadership. Some of our buildings, again, staffing, not being able to find principals. So looking at all the different components, but a district is in charge, but must institute something that would say, this is how we're going to reconstitute and move forward for next steps.
Any other questions? Mr. Mumel? Any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Not for now. I'll let other people have a chance.
Very good. Thank you very much. Dr. Pugh.
Somewhat on the lines of Board Member McMillan's last question and what we were talking about, on slide 14, when you define intensive, the level of partnership, and it says a district that previously had a partnership agreement, is that synonymous with reconstitution?
No.
Okay. Okay.
This is re-identified.
Because I'm looking at the number 14. I was just wondering if, like, can you define that a little bit better for me?
So this is it's a district that had previously had a partnership agreement, but now may have new schools that were identified.
Okay.
And so because of that, they are now re-identified. So that happens more frequently. For example, Detroit Public Schools Community District. They had a large number of schools removed from partnership, and then another group of schools that were identified.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. Ms. Lipton? And then Dr. Pritchard.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I do believe that, given the options that the state has in managing challenged school districts, I do believe that this is by far and above the best model in comparison to a model that was in existence prior to this time, which was the state coming in and taking over a district, putting in oftentimes people that close schools, and I think we have a lot of experience in this state with that model. And I, for one, I'm just speaking for myself, but looking at the research, districts that were taken over actually did worse when the state intervened. And so I do believe that the partnership model is really by far and above a superior and maybe the best model out there in terms of collaboratively working with districts, supporting districts, and also maintaining an element of local control, but guided in terms of assisting a district in sort of righting its ship, if you will. This type of work, having looked at the research and really even having observed districts that have actually gone through this, Pontiac in particular, where we also have a promise zone, this is very, very labor-intensive work, involving, it's hard work. And my question is, do you feel that the department has adequate resources and staff and really just assistance in doing this kind of work for the districts that need it? Because I do believe that it is, in fact, the superior model, and I think that the results show districts that have gone through this are coming out and improving and moving in the direction we want them to.
I'll start off with the response of the resource at the department. We can always use more staff, right? And we are always looking for more staff. But what we did this year, or at least 2 years ago, we started in 22, is that we decided that it wasn't a one approach for all. It wasn't a cookie cutter approach for all. And that's one of the reasons why we have the 3 levels, so that we can intensify our work with the districts that need support the most. We also now have the Office of Educator Support assisting us with schools that have been identified for comprehensive support and improvement, but aren't at the bottom 5% in all categories. So instead of having everyone do the same type of work for all schools that are labeled CSI, we have divided or split up the work so that we can work with the schools that need the most support. So we've taken away the cookie cutter approach. We've tried to take away the hammer. I was one of those districts that had to fire the principal or reconstitute the school, change 50% of the staff, get a new principal. And that constant merry-go-round of staff in and out in a poor community was not the best method. You can't keep the trajectory going to try to improve student achievement when people in the building are uncertain as to whether or not they're going to be there or not. And then it's also difficult to understand whether or not the new people that you're going to get in have the same or better skill set than the people that you're replacing, because the number is 50%, right? So sometimes you don't want to get rid of some of your best teachers when you have good teachers in the building. So we like this approach better. We are going to measure it over time to see if this is the best approach. We do have EPIC helping us, but that's where we are right now.
So it sounds to me like, you're sort of differentiating
exactly
the challenges, which I think makes complete sense, because then you can really target your resources. But it sounds to me like there's always, from the department standpoint, a resource allocation challenge.
In most state government, I mean,
Yeah.
MD is not alone. School districts are facing the same challenges, and other states are facing the same challenges in their departments as well.
Yeah, but the Office of OPD is not a standalone office. It's the supports that we receive from the offices throughout the department. And so being able to, for example, homeless, there was a grant that was available. And so being able for us to connect with that office directly. And that office was able to share something and said, hey, this was something that, would benefit your partnership districts. So having that connection, the cross-office work is essential. As you mentioned, this is difficult, it's challenging, but the collaborative work efforts throughout the entire department are instrumental. And the other piece would be the support that we've received through the intermediate school district. What they have been able to do to come in to play a major role in being at the table. So when supports are asked for, we have the key people who can make those decisions right there at the table. And the districts can feel supported and begin to move forward instead of saying, we'll take it back, we'll have a discussion with someone else, and then come back to you. So the rapid response, the customized responses, as Dr. Carnell mentioned, is not a cookie cutter approach. So we're going in, we're listening, we're getting the input from the community, we're getting the input from all the key players in that district, because what works for a district on the west side of the state may not be something that's conducive to something in southwest or southeast Detroit. So we try to be flexible, but at the same time push, because our end concern is the academic outcomes, the achievement for the students.
I think noting the input from the ISD is really important. That was really always my sense, that having that sort of local entity, but not necessarily the hammer of the state, could sometimes sort of soften some of the guidance, or maybe some of the natural fear that a district might feel when the state is coming in. So having the ISD as sort of that local intermediary, I think, can be really, really helpful. Do you get the same kind of, or do you have a sense that the same kind of collaboration is occurring with the authorizers when you have a charter school that is on the partnership list?
Right. So,
or some authorizers better. I mean, I don't know.
Well, again, everyone's a little bit the individual components come into play, but all of the key players that need to be at the table from the beginning, once a district is identified, they are invited to be a part. So it's from start to finish and what that looks like. Because we know that we can't do this in isolation. We also don't want to bring in an authorizer halfway through the process. So we want to ensure that at every meeting, when we're calling those meetings, that everyone who needs to have input is sitting at the table. And again, those decisions about what needs to take place, we need to be able to move quickly as opposed to sitting back and having to go back and share information with someone. So we need to have all voices heard.
I'm just curious if you've had, I mean, the reason why I ask is, we did a records request some time ago, the board asking, just financial information from different charter school academies, and just had some difficulty getting information from authorizers. And so I was just curious if you've faced any difficult obstacles from authorizers.
It's like family, right? We all don't get along sometimes, but we go back.
Some better than others.
Right, right. And so it's different levels, different, depends on who the authorizer is. So again, it's being able to keep that door open, being able to sit down and have the difficult conversations, being able to be collaborative, and everyone being in agreement about where our focus lies, and so that we're all moving in the same direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pritchett and Ms. Tilley.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, I appreciate the fact that you are monitoring and adjusting, as Madeline Hunter would say if she was here, because I was still working at the ISD level when this concept was first introduced, and we knew that we were forging new territory. And so it is coming along as it needs to, especially identifying the fact that no two schools, even in the same district, are the same and have different needs. So I certainly appreciate that. I concur with Mr. McMillan that this process, I believe, is the best process to assist those schools that, for a myriad of reasons, have found themselves in this situation. And for each school, that usually is different reasons. So, and appreciate the fact that you're reaching out to the community, parents, community members, because it is a community problem. And the solution can come from an entire community. So just to clarify some things in my own mind, so we're starting with a new cycle now, for lack of a better term. You'll be working towards the 18-month.
We're already in, this is round 4.
Right.
They were identified last year. So yes, they're almost to the halfway point. We will have our 18-month check-in, the benchmark review, which will start this summer, in fact.
Okay.
So we're starting that process is already beginning.
And unless my math's wrong, which very well could be, there are 37 schools that were identified that chose not to be in a partnership agreement. Am I correct on that, or did I misunderstand?
So there are 37, but they did not choose not to be. They did not meet the requirements for a partnership district assignment. Right. But they are being, OPD is providing supports for those districts. So again, to kind of make sure that, again, the cross-office work, we didn't want 20 different people from MDE going in to work with a district. And so if a district has been already identified as a partnership district and has other schools identified for CSI, ATS, then OPD will take care of and support those schools as well. So when a district meets, they meet once, and they only have the face of that one liaison or the one person who's coming from the ISD.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. Ms. Tilley, Ms. Snyder.
This is a great overview of the program and the new allocation of funding. wanted to know next month, can we get a report more specific to the schools that are part of the partnership districts and where they're at? It would be great to see the outcomes. I know some of the schools you said are no longer a part of the partnership agreement, so they passed. I want to see how the schools overall are doing.
The current 105 schools. Susan, that's what you're speaking of?
The data, yes, and the outcomes, and where are we? You know, how are they doing? How are they faring? How effective is what we're doing? You know, I want to be able to see that through the data.
We can get that information. I just want to caution us, everyone, that because we're just at the 18-month state, we don't have a lot of data, years of the MSTEP to show that there has been improvement on state assessment. We may be able to show that there's some improvement on NWEA. But what's important about partnership district, because it works with the bottom 5%, some of the issues that has to be addressed include foundational work at the district level. How do you get teachers in? How do you retain teachers? And then once we get that stabilized, then we can work on the professional development. Because as we work with professional development and we don't have a stable system, what happens is you get teachers in and out and you don't have a set number of teachers that can participate in the professional development or even weigh in on what professional development activities. But again, we have no problems getting that information to you. Some of our, what we've asked EPIC to do a little bit differently is to give us scenarios and stories about how people feel, particular teachers, feel about being in a partnership district. Because if they feel supported, they will stay there. When a student has a stable teacher, they do better academically. So we're looking at that as well. You heard Ms. Chapman talk about at the very end that we're having this network event with partnership districts at the end of this month. We do have EPIC coming to say, here are some successes. Here are some things that we see are moving the needle forward. So we won't have these giant leaps of academic data that will say these kids are just automatically doing better or instruction is just automatically happen and you'll see this through the report. We have to take the baby steps or the significant steps to make sure that we improve the system for everyone. Okay.
And it doesn't just have to be the standardized data. It can also be those foundational benchmarks that have been improved. I know before, when I first joined the board, we would get monthly updates on the status of the partnership districts. And then especially the ones that needed more assistance. So it would be helpful to know exactly where we're at, why we're there, and how we're doing, who has improved. And looking at that data can help us to know how we may be able to help some other districts improve as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tilley. I do think that to the point that both Dr. Carnell and Ms. Chapman have raised relative to EPIC, I do think EPIC presenting on its reports would be of value. Whether or not that can be, in a month or 2 months is a question. But I do think in the next few months they need to come and share with us their work, because it really has been, I think, validating of the model, but indicative also of the limitations of a model that would change long-standing and pretty substantial challenges at a local school district level from Lansing, from a distance. Thank you, Ms. Tilley. Ms. Snyder.
So in a concrete way, I would like to join Tiffany in the request for data. The law actually specifically states that specific measurable benchmarks that will be met within 18 months to improve student achievement and identification of expected student achievement outcomes to be attained within 3 years after assignment to the partnership. And then it further says, craft academic goals that put pupils on track to meet or exceed grade level proficiency. That is directly related to literacy, which is a significant issue for students in partnership districts. Yeah. We talked about that as it relates to the review of goal attainment process this last May of 2022. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the law is written and the department does that work. That's their role within the partnership agreement, mm-hmm. and that's what helps encourage partnerships to grow and develop together. Mm-hmm. And then when we think about what the purpose of it is, the student's at the center. And so yes. Literacy, as it relates to this kind of data, should be something that we can see improve significantly and in a concrete fashion. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see that too. Mm-hmm. Even if it's all 104 districts, that's the work that we're doing here together.
Mm-hmm. And just for clarification, is 47 district, 105 schools.
Yes. Understood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. Other individuals, Mr. McMillan?
So one thing I'm curious about is there the metrics that you mentioned, is there a hyper focus on those metrics? Like, you know, a lot of us, or most of us, or maybe all of us, have expressed concern about high stakes testing and teaching to the test. And, you know, do things get dropped off if they're not on the test? Not one of the metrics, like, you know, does art or music or athletics or science, if that's not one of the metrics that everybody's focused on? I mean, is there a hyper focus that would kind of make it so that a rounded, full education may be a little bit more difficult?
No, I would say not. And the last slide that Ms. Chapman showed for our networking event talked about MTSS, so we look at multi-tier systems of support, which means that we look at what else needs to occur. What areas do we need to look at for students in different tiers or different levels of instruction? And as the librarian, Ms. Melissa Lambert, suggested and the students talked about, with that one book, how science is a part of it, art is a part of the one book reading, good educators know that you can't hyper focus on the assessment because students express their knowledge in different way. They learn in different way. So it's best to have a variety of ways in which students can show their work. It's best to have an opportunity for students to learn in different realms. It's like taking recess away from a child. We know that recess and play helps brain development. So we shouldn't hyper focus on the assessment. We should hyper focus on children and how they best learn.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. And CTE also, hopefully that doesn't get thrown.
You're exactly right.
That doesn't get pushed aside. Yeah. And then finally, you know, with the whole reading wars and, you know, now the kind of bringing back to saying that we've been wrong in our quote unquote science for decades, and now the cueing and Lucy Calkins and whole language should not be the focus or the level or the main strain of instruction for reading. Are we making sure that is done? You know, that we're teaching you know, reading to the science of reading in these partnership districts. I mean, if there's anything that we need to make sure of as far as increasing reading scores and just making sure kids can read better, it's making sure that we're instructing them better on intensive phonics. And so I just wanted to make sure that is a priority.
Well, let me address this in two ways. The first way, when we speak about the reading wars have been around for as long as I can remember. Even at my first time at the department when I was director of the Office of School Excellence and started the standards on ELA, we had the reading wars. It took me a while to come to the table to present to the State Board of Education on ELA because of the reading wars. And the reading wars were adults fighting over this issue. And we didn't get a chance to get it to kids. So it's adults versus the kids. And we want to get instruction to the kids as quickly and best as possible. Secondly, we have letters training that we are promoting as a department. Letters training deals, as I mentioned last time I was at the table, with phonetics, fluency, and comprehension. So it's both worlds together, providing good instruction and teaching teachers about good instruction so that they can use that instructional practice with students to improve student achievement.
Okay. I mean, in the 90s, and I was involved with the reading wars, and I wasn't fighting adults. I mean, I was fighting adults to make sure that the kids could read, and, you know, we were arguing what now is, they've decided is correct, but we were arguing back in the 90s, and millions of kids have since had real problems that they wouldn't have been if those adults would have won out over the other adults in deciding what the kids should be instructed. So that was.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan.
Mr. McMillan, any other reflections on that?
Thank you.
No, okay. Ms. Tilley.
Can you remind me with the letters training, what percentage is phonics?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out for you.
So you may recall that we do this metric on Scarborough's rope, and we talk about the two portions of letters training. Letters training can last 18 to 24 months, and approximately half of that is on sort of the basic elements of reading instruction, and half beyond that for some of the things that Dr. Carnell has talked about, the fluency, the vocabulary development, the creation of focus on knowledge, which becomes prior knowledge as you attack each new text. So it really, the first portion of that is really akin to what Mr. McMillan is hearkening back to in the reading wars. The second portion, I think to Dr. Carnell's point, is also letters training, but is not a function of what back in the day was the phonics focus. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important to note. We continue to push to expand these numbers. 6,500 from nothing 2 years ago. I mean, literally, there were letters training was rarely seen in the state, and we've driven a focus on this. But it's not simply a back to phonics movement. It's more than that. There's more there than simply a focus on phonics. Any other questions or comments from board members? If not, I'm going to sum up and bring us into lunch. The previous effort to take over local schools, to which a few of you have focused, that effort was illegal. So let's just be clear. It wasn't simply a different model. It was illegal. It was not supported by state statute. And it was quickly replaced by a new model, one that was legal. This is not my opinion. This is a function of a lawsuit that took place. And the state of Michigan was going to lose that lawsuit, but for its walking back, its ham-handed and illegal effort to take over local schools in the state. It's not to say that you can't create a structure, a model like that, but our state doesn't permit it. The partnership model, which is embedded now in the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA Plan Act, the ESSA Act plan for the state is a more collaborative approach, to Ms. Chapman's point, is an effort to work alongside of local school districts, to not hammer them, but to partner with them. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the cross-office work is huge, but the offices are small, and so too the department. The connection with the ISDs is enormously important because, as a number of you have pointed out, they are more local than we are. And if they have good relationships with the local school districts, and when they have good relationships, those are really fruitful partnerships. and we've benefited from them, and more importantly, local school districts have benefited from them in improving instruction. Lansing is not a substitute for gaps at the local school level. Can we help? Yes. Can we educate children at the local school level? Not vaguely possible. And then to one other point, I think this was Dr. Carnell, to your point. There are elements that overarch instruction. If they are done well, or minimally if they are not done poorly, more time, attention, focus, money, staffing goes toward the instruction of young people. If they are done poorly, they get in the way of work with young people. And the best example of this is a board that adversely affects the local administration, and by extension, the work with young people. So we've deliberately included board member training in a number of these agreements because we, along with local school districts and ISDs, believe that in a number of cases that board training is important. Thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. Board, it is 11:59, and we are going to adjourn for lunch, and we will pick it back up again at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch.